But no, thanks a lot for giving time to chat and welcome everyone. I think today is kind of like different time we're exploring because I'm currently in SF, so the old time will be a bit weird, but hopefully it's um, not too bad for the rest team in terms of like the time. But also let me know like where you're based in so we can also find the best time to fit most of the community member hopefully. Um, but yeah, we'll record this call, so we'll share in the community later for the rest of the community to share. And today I will have Akhil joining. So Akhil has been in community, and or if you've been in community for a while, you probably see a lot of cool stuff he shared already. But today I think the thing I don't know if you actually sharing the community post before about what you're doing specifically from the business you are running, but I think Akhil also run this called Flux GTM, and maybe you will explain better, but I will just share the website. Looks like really cool because I believe he figured out a kind of workflow about how do you generate uh, assets like web pages or PDF type of web page using Claude Code that is really on brand based on your specific branding guideline, stuff like that, which is really useful. So yeah, I'll probably let you explain better, Akhil, and take over there.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Jason. Yeah, so the thing that I'm working on right now is called Flux GTM, and we're making sales assets essentially for B2B sales teams. And I'm not sure how many people have worked in B2B sales, so I might do a bit of a crash course in sort of why some of this content is so useful. But yeah, Jason dropped a link in the chat. There's a QR code as well if you're interested. I'll just put up the website real quick. So here's what we're making. So a couple of examples of the content that we're producing for clients on the right-hand side. And sum it all up, we make pretty PDFs for salespeople. You know, people need to communicate the different asset or the different value points of what their product and service does, whether it's through company overviews, data sheets, case studies, etc. If you're selling to big companies like HSBC, Bank of America, Lululemon, Nike, their procurement teams and their finance teams are going to be expecting certain types of content so they can compare different vendors against one another. And what we're doing is making the different types of content for those folks in the sales teams that are trying to pitch to those big companies. And we're trying to do it in a way that uses AI workflows to make the whole process a lot more seamless. And yeah, that's sort of the gist of what I'm working on as the sort of main focus right now. If you want to learn more, feel free to shoot me a DM on the community, shoot me an email. I think you can find me pretty easily. But I'm going to go through a few things today. So first, I'm going to go through a bit of a background on like B2B sales and why the stuff that we're working on is sort of useful for people. And then I'm going to go a bit into the sort of nitty-gritty detail about how we're sort of hacking around with Claude Code to make the process of creating these assets a lot more consistent and a lot faster than if you're like using an agency or freelancers or even doing it in-house. Right now, we're sort of offering it as a bit of a service. So we're doing the work for people, but the sort of bigger vision is sort of being like a lovable for go-to-market teams. So if you can imagine, sales people need these types of content all the time. We want to be the place where you can go in, create the content that you need super specific to your company, and then have something that's ready to share out the back of it very quickly. So that's sort of the vision of what we're going towards. Right now we're focused on pretty PDFs, but yeah, that might go to websites, dynamic web pages, etc. in the future. We just know that this is sort of how sales still works in these big companies for the time being, at least. Now, I'm going to go into some specifics now, but before I do, any questions from anyone who's on the line? All right, cool. Let's burst into it. So, I know that many people here are thinking about sort of B2B stuff. Oh, Ankit, yeah, go ahead, mate.
Hey, just quick question. It's funny. I'm glad you appreciate you presenting. I actually work on this problem right now with some of the stuff that we're creating. Are you using Claude SDK to help generate any of this, or is that something you're going to be covering, or is it Like, how, yeah, I guess, will that be covered in your presentation?
Yeah, so right now I'm just using Claude Code locally on my machine, but with a bunch of different enablers that are specific to this workflow. So I'll go through those things like custom slash commands, guidelines, prompts, like the overall process as well. So I'll get into all of that, but the vision, Ankit, is longer term to use something like Claude Code SDK and just move this logic into a web app once we've got that process dialed.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Good question. So yeah, I know many people are thinking about sort of B2C apps or solutions where, you know, you've got one person, the person who's consuming the thing is also the buyer. They make the buying decisions. In B2B, things are a little bit different. You might have a person who wants to buy the thing, and you've got you and your solution. But this person needs to then convince other people in their organization. So that might be a manager. Then the manager might need to go ahead and convince an exec. And then this person who's also your sponsor, maybe they've got a couple peers that they need to also update. So instead of just selling this to one person, you need to sell this idea and this to, you know, tens of people who are all going to be making the decision. And that's just on the functional side. And then you get to the sort of purse string holders of the people who make decisions around money. You got people like finance and procurement who also come into the mix. So in B2C, you might just be convincing one person, maybe two people, especially if it's a lower price thing, you know, $50 a month, $100 a month. But for the big enterprise deals, you know, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for just the software, and then there might be some services in addition to that. This is sort of my background. This is what I've been doing for many years. This is the type of sales that we need to go through, and we need to get all of these different people on the same page. And there's a bunch of different ways that we do that. So there's all of these different activities that are happening. So you might have some sales calls, you might have some product demos, you might do some customer reference calls. But then there's also a bunch of different documents that you need that can be shared across these individuals to help convince them all, like, hey, this is the thing that we need to do. And we need to compare not only one of these vendors, we need to compare it against 4 or 5 others and then make the best decision for our organization. So this is the way that sort of B2B sales works today. And this means folks need a lot of material. They need a lot of different types of content to position themselves in the best way to their prospects. So that's just a bit of background on sort of how this machine works. And you can imagine it's a super important problem to solve, because you want to make sure that every piece of content that you're putting in front of your prospects, and this isn't just like social media and externally facing things on the website, but it's also the stuff that's behind closed doors, essentially, it is hitting these different value points. And how does that work in practice? You know, you might have somebody in sales, you know, they go over to a copywriter and say, hey, we need this document. Copywriter says, we don't understand what you mean. What's the case study that you're looking for? Okay, they'll have a bit of back and forth, make sure they get the value points down from the for this specific prospect. And then sales guy then needs to go to a designer who's going to then make the thing and say, okay, can you put this into our PowerPoint templates? Can you give it a PDF? I'll say, oh, well, what graphics do you want? What type of charts do you want on this? Which screenshots should we use? And this whole process takes so long for something that feels like it's relatively simple. You just got to output out the back of it. And some of these things would be like these examples I've got up here, where I just pulled these randomly off the internet, where you just need a sheet that you can send to somebody that explains what you do, whether it's related to the product, whether it's related to the company, whether it's related to security, whether it's related to other customers. There's a bunch of these different documents that all of these B2B companies are creating. And just making one of these takes ages. So the vision is to try and reduce that effort by using AI to set workflows that can reduce the amount of inputs and outputs. And that's my specific use case. But this type of process exists across any B2B type of scenario, or honestly, any type of scenario where you've got a process where you might have some information that you want. you want some output out the other end. In our case, it's at documents, but this could be websites, this could be data, it could be analysis, it could be anything. And then we've got a process. And that process is what we're trying to automate using AI. And some of the concepts I'm going to talk about here are relevant to what I'm doing, but they will apply to many different circumstances or scenarios as well. So I'm going to get into the sort of meat and potatoes of this in a second, but I'll pause for any questions. Jason, yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, by the way, this is awesome because I'm also just start working on some B2B products, so the understanding sales cycle is really useful. One question is that like there are so many stakeholders you need to convince internally. Do you like need to prepare different material for different stakeholders? Do you often care about different things, or do you just like the few all points you showing above should cover all those people's concern and just put into one sheet?
Yeah, it's a good point. So you'd probably have many different types of assets. So you'd have something that is relevant for the users, so you can win them over. You'd have something that's more focused on ROI for the executives and for finance. You'd have something that's maybe more security focused for InfoSec teams. And you'd have all of these different things. And you'd probably have a generic version of this, which is like just standard, you can send to anybody. And then through the process of a sales cycle, you'd probably also customize it a little bit to say, okay, that's a generic one, but if we're selling to AI Builder Club, you know, we want to tailor that to what their specific use case is, or what their specific pain points are.
Gotcha, that makes sense. And that's where your AI, I guess, can just personalize for whatever persona and people easily.
Eventually, yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal to get to that.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, Ankit.
Yeah, how opinionated is your software process? Like, hey, you have a best practices for B2B sales, and this is the infrastructure. Or do you give like if they have a different type of sales process, do you let them have flexibility in creating that? Like that seems to be in my mind, it's hard to do if something that's not opinionated.
Yeah, honestly, it's such a good question, and that's why we're offering this as a service to start instead of a product. So then we can be more adaptable. Because if it's a product and you're trying to be all things to all people, from experience of trying to build this out as a product initially, like it is very hard to account for every single edge case. So we're probably trying to do like an 80-20 here of like, what are the 9, 12 big or common assets that we know that most companies are going to need? And then let's use our best practices for each of them to like put together a pretty opinionated way of, here's how you structure a case study. Here's how you structure a company overview. Here's how you structure a product data sheet. Here's how you structure industry focus or industry specific content. And then we'll probably allow for some adaptation through the process of creating something. So we get like maybe 90% of the way there with like a one hit using some guidelines that I'll go through in a second. But then there's always going to be a bit of tweaking and updating and changing afterwards.
Okay. And build on that quick question. With that, are you focused on a particular vertical, or are you focused mainly on particular assets? So are you looking for people who want a particular asset, or are you focused on a particular industry that needs assets to fulfill the need? I'm curious how you target it and focus on that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So sort of by accident, we fell into a bit of a niche in cybersecurity companies because they have pretty technical software and they're not always the most design forward, and something that might look okay for somebody internally might not look right for a prospect on the other side. So, and it's also partly network, like that's where I know a couple of people who've made some referrals and stuff. So that's sort of where we're starting. But the goal is for these assets to be industry agnostic. But we might end up finding that, there's more of a demand in these types of companies than others. For example, I was trying to do some like outbound type of stuff. And I was like, let me go through like all the YC companies and like, let me just create some assets for them and shoot them over. But those companies are very design forward. I'll show you some examples of companies that we're doing stuff for. And there's just a difference in like the 90% of companies that have been operating. They don't have a big team. They don't have all of the capacity to make these things, compared to like those highly funded like companies that have like built out marketing teams, etc.
And And last question, I apologize. So have you gotten anyone on the buyer side as a client instead of the seller side? Because I would imagine this might be really helpful to say, hey, give me all, hire you to have people input certain information and categorize it and put it in a way that I can analyze it side by side equally. That to me would probably be more value as a value proposition versus from the seller side potentially.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I'm not for this process. I have thought about doing some stuff more on the buyer enablement side. To be candid, there's a lot more money in sales than in procurement.
That's true.
So it's like, if you can help somebody sell something that costs tens of thousands of dollars a month, they're willing to pay you a chunk to get to that sort of promised outcome. Helping somebody spend more money on something, it's a bit of a harder sell. But
good point.
Yeah, good question. Yeah. Any other questions from the group while we paused here for a second? All right, cool. All right, I'm going to get into the actual specifics of my process now a little bit. So that's sort of the conceptual thing. Now, this is the high-level process, and we do this in 2 phases. And the main reason we do this in 2 phases is because it enables us to have consistent outputs. So we start off by building out what I'm calling a design foundation, which builds a component library as the sort of main output of this, which is all of the building blocks that we'll be using in different outputs. And we take a couple of inputs into that process. So we take some brand images. This would be things like logos, screenshots, any existing material that they've got, as well as a design inspiration. So this might be photos or images from their website. It might be of competitors that they like. It might just be of sort of, hey, I like the vibe of Supabase. Let's just create one that looks like that. And that's an example that I did as well. And then I go through 3 different stages of the design foundation. And I found that really breaking this problem down has helped increase the quality and consistency of the outputs. So phase 1 is create what I'm calling a brand system, which is a structured JSON file. And I think I've got some examples to the right here. So here's some inspo images. Again, I was using Supabase for this one as an example. And then from those images, I'm extracting, using a generic template, all of the design elements, super specific. This is what's the hex code, what's the tailwind class, how's this color supposed to be used, what's the typography, etc. And I've got a generic template that I reuse across different clients, but then that gets adapted to this specific one based on the images that we're receiving here. So that's sort of the first step in the process. Second step is using that design system as well as the inspo images. I want to create a component library. So these are essentially the building blocks. If many of you probably use ShadCN, like in that you've got these different building blocks that you can use across different apps. I'm doing something similar in some ways, but I'm doing it in HTML files, where I'm building out this styled component library of, here's what a header for this client looks like. Here's what a footer for this client looks like. Here's like what some graphs and charts should look like for them as well. And then I use that with the design tokens that we get in that JSON file. And here's an example of what that looks like, where we've got different headers, we've got multiple versions of that. We've got here's a bunch of different metric cards. So you can see like these are the generic things that are styled super specific to this brand that then we can use and recycle across different types of assets. And this is what's really important, so then we can have consistency across different types of documents that we're creating. Now, I'm talking about this from a document perspective, and I'm super focused on that. But these same concepts apply if you're creating different web pages as well, right? Like you might have your React library of components, and you want to reuse them. The same concept applies here. We're creating a library of reusable building blocks that then can be adapted to the specific situation that we're using them in. And yeah, just a couple other examples of that here. And if I scroll down a little, got another example. Here's another one. They've got their styling, their branding, their style of tables, etc. Here's one that was having a bit of fun with, and I was like, oh, what would one look like if I used Anthropic's branding as the output? And here's an example where you've got sort of their vibe. I changed it so it's using green instead of that coral color. But you can get a sense of like, okay, we get these reusable elements, and then these are the elements that we'll use when we create the assets. But this is all part of the design foundation, the building blocks for all of the different assets that we're going to be making. Yep, Jason?
Oh yeah, I think this is awesome. And the one thing I noticed is the quality of the component you generate is actually really good. Probably better than I'm pretty sure I just threw that JSON to Claude Code to generate. Like, what do you have any like secret sauce about how to get those components looks as high quality?
Yeah, honestly, Opus is doing a lot of lifting here, but I can break down how I get to there, because it isn't just a one hit. Like, and this is one of the reasons, Ankit, as well, that I'm using Claude Code and not just using completely automated via the SDK, is because these creative things are quite iterative. So you need to have a look at the output, critique the output, provide suggestions, and then get a better output, and then go through that process maybe 3 to 4 times, calling out specific changes each time. One thing that I've found that helps increase the quality is using, where did I put this one? Is using I think it's in another sheet that I'll come to in a second, but priming the model on like what you're going to be doing, and then giving some explanation of what files it's going to receive. Actually, here, I've got it here. So what I do is prime the model. So I say, new session, this is what we're going to be working on today. This is the files that I'm going to give you. This is some general context. I don't ask it to do anything, but I just say, hey, this is what we're working on. Make sure it understands that, always does. Then say, okay, now I'm going to give you the files. Now take a look at all of these files, whether they're the design inspiration images, whether they're the generic templates that I use, and the instructions. Put together a plan. I review the plan, make sure it looks okay, and then say, okay, go and execute. And then it goes off and creates an example, version 1. And then this is the sort of iterative part where we then review and improve, review and improve, review and improve. And I'll show you a specific example, Jason. So here's one that I was just working on today for today's session. So maybe I'll show you a website here. So this is a facilities operations software. So this is like through a contact of mine, and they wanted to, we're seeing how we can help them put together some assets. So you can see their website. It's fine. There's probably opportunities to improve this, to make it look more modern, etc. But they don't really have any sales assets. So I went through this process of the design foundation where I had the JSON file, then I created the component library. And this is actually V2. I accidentally overwrote V1. So the first iteration looked a little worse than this. But I had this, and I was like, okay, it's extracted some of the right things, but you can see there's a couple issues and things here. Oh, yeah, Ankit.
When you go through the prepare process, do you normalize it? So when I do this in my process, I actually get to create the content and research first using Claude Code. And then what I found was if I had the output structured properly, then I could have another set of instructions to actually execute on the website and the assets to create. And it's very minimal tweaks at that point. It does it like 90% of the way, 95% of the way there. But the assets all have to be in a similar format. Is that what you're doing with the prepare? And design's a little different than what I'm doing, but I'm curious how that works from your side. Do you normalize it? Yeah,
it's very, very similar approach. So I have like this standard template of like, here's the different building blocks that I want. Super generic in terms of style, but And this gives you, to your exact point, like I don't need to have it create all of these things. If I know that every document is going to have a header, every document is going to have some type of metric card, we're going to have some text blocks, we're going to have some tables, we're going to have a footer, we need to explain how to use it, etc. So I have these like generic versions, but as you can see, when I go straight from that to this, in the first turn, the first iteration, the design, it basically just does some color swapping. It's like, okay, let's just update the colors a little bit, and maybe put in a nice gradient here or there. I then ask it to review itself all of the issues that it's seen, and I might give it a couple more screenshots in a chat, and then say, okay, based on what you see here and what you've produced, list all of the issues. Don't suggest any improvements, just list the issues with what you've seen. And then it lists the issues, and then I pick the issues that I want to address and say, okay, put together a plan to fix these 4. And then it does that. And then we end up with something that is a little more on brand. And that's this example here. So you can see that it's added in some small details, like it's got these color emphasis going. It's simplified it a little bit. It's made it a bit more subtle in places. And then I'm like, okay, that's a bit better. It's added in a couple more things like these pills, etc. And then I do that again and say, okay, now that's a step in the right direction, but in this case, we need a lot more navy. Like navy is the primary color here. We need that to come out a lot more. So then that's the next turn where I say, go through and review this. And now here's this is the fourth iteration, where it's a lot closer to the website that we're aiming for. And it has like a better balance of the colors, where it's slightly more blue, it's got a bit more white space, it's still got some of this accent colors, etc. And this is
so you go straight from website to your asset. There's not an intermediary step where you say, here's any given website, map these particular items, and then use that mapping to create the website. You're going straight from website to a direct product.
Yeah. So we're going from the website in terms of like screenshots from this, basically.
Yep. Got it.
Let me take a couple screenshots from this. Let me take the generic template that I've got. And the other thing is the JSON template of like the specific brand colors and stuff. Okay. Let me bring all of these 3 things together with a set of detailed instructions that I'll pull up in a second, of like, here's how to create this, here's what I want you to do, here's what I don't want you to do. And then that gets me to that type of output.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Vikrant?
Yeah, quick question. Can you back up for a quick moment and help me understand what was the scope here? So you showed the first website. Did they bring you in to build a website or sales assets? Thanks.
Sales assets. So because they don't have any assets today, what we're doing is using their website as the design inspiration for the assets. If they had like some existing docs or something, we could probably just use those. But yeah, because they didn't have anything, we're going with this.
What sales asset are you specifically building?
Yeah, for these guys, we're going to make a couple things. So it'll be a product data sheet. So a technical overview of what the product does. Not too dissimilar to something like a couple of these guys up here.
So so I guess this is for the technical buyer. This one of these assets you're building?
Yeah, so this could be the technical buyer. We might also do something that may be InfoSec related. So again, slightly more technical side.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I was just trying to get grounded in what we were looking at. Thank you.
Yeah, no, good question. And what we're looking at right now, or what we were looking at here, the building blocks that we've got here, these are just the sort of primitives in some way. Like if we were doing an ROI focused output, that's more for an executive, we can still reuse these different elements. If we were doing something that is more super technical, it may be a bit more verbose, we might use some of these more text blocky type of things. But yeah, that's sort of the type of thing that we're working with. And yeah, these should be used across all different types of assets. So whether it's something super technical or otherwise, and I can pull up an example.
Every app that you develop is a web page, correct?
No, so this is one of the interesting things. Like we're focused on creating like pretty PDFs essentially that can be sent to a buyer during a sales cycle. I thought that would be easier because I was like, oh, you know, we don't need to worry about hosting, etc. But it turns out that getting content to neatly fit onto like an A4 page is a pretty hard technical problem.
That's pretty hard. Yeah, I was gonna say, sounds like the PDF is actually harder than the website.
Yeah. It's a funny one. Like it's one of those things where you think, oh yeah, how hard could it be? And then you go down that route and you're like, oh yeah, it is pretty hard. But I can pull up an example of like a completed one here. If I go over to my cursor, sorry for jumping around a little, but this should give you an idea, Vikram, of like the type of thing that we're making. I think let's do this one. And I'll just swap over the screens. So like here's like a finished output of one of these where we've got all of the content from the prospect. We've got that formatted, and the cool thing is when we print a PDF, like this neatly fits onto
that's pretty cool. Yeah, I was gonna say doing PDF. I can appreciate the hosting issue. That's a different issue, and will it, you know, what IP addresses are they blocking? All that stuff can make it hard, but this is hard too. All right, continue.
Yeah, exactly. And just to give you a sense of like the variety, and we focused all on the design. There's a huge part to getting the copy and the wording down as well that I'll talk about in a second. But just to give you an idea of sort of the range of what some of these could look like, here's another example that uses that more anthropic-y style design for that same company. Because this company didn't have any design. They didn't even have like a website. So we just said, hey, let's just get creative with it and put together a couple of examples for them. Like, do you want one that is more super cyber security, like dark mode focused? Or do you want something that's slightly more elevated, slightly more professional, slightly more classic in design? And so like we can do a range of different things following this exact same process of get your images, get your design, get the brand tokens, create the building blocks, and then create the asset template.
And your tech stack on this, I think you said you're using Claude Code and Cursor. Is that what you're using primarily? Okay.
Yeah. Claude Code is basically what I'm running through for all of this. Maybe a couple tweaks here and there using Cursor, but majority of it is in Claude Code. And related to that, I might talk through some of the things that I found that work when we're doing some of the design foundation pieces. So with this, there's a real balance that I found in providing enough context to get a task done with enough freedom or enough context space to like not get confused and tripped up on itself. And I found that having a new session for each discrete task has really helped. So for the different things that we've been looking at, for the asset template or the JSON file, I'll start the chat, I'll prime the chat, I'll create, and then I'll go through that review loop and that iteration once or twice. But then I'll try to keep all of that JSON creation in one session. Once I'm happy with that, I'd then take that, feed it into another session. I'd have it review the README, prime it, create the component library this time, and then review the issues and then iterate. And then same for the asset template. Fresh chat, I'll just actually give the asset template both of these guys, and then it can create the structure of the output that we want. I've not talked about what the asset template is actually, but that is a structure that has really helped to get the documents into the correct number of pages. And what this is, it's basically a blank A4 page, but it has all of the custom styling already in it. So all the custom CSS classes, some of the different component blocks, like the header, like the footer, it's all there, and it has a specific set of dimensions. And I found that giving the model a template to work in that has set dimensions really improves how it understands and how to lay out content across a page. Very different from a web page, right? Because if in a web page you've got infinite space, so you can be really lazy with like trying to make things dense, because you can just spread things out and keep going, keep going, keep going. With this, you have to be a lot more intentional with how you lay things out. And I found that this approach helps, where you got your building blocks, you then have a template which has all the custom styles from those building blocks, and then you also have the set dimensions, and then the model gets a lot better at placing content across both of those different pages, or however many pages you want to create, honestly. Okay, so that's sort of a bit on the process on the design side. And I wanted to focus on the design side mainly because it's much more visual. But there's a huge element to this, which is the text and the copy. So I'll talk about that because it's easy to create a lot of text using AI, but it's also easy to tell that it's created by AI. You have these similar types of phrases. You're absolutely right. It's not this, it's that. Like these things, like it feels bad. If I get an email like that, I'm not listening and reading it. If I see a document with that stuff, I'm not reading it. So in addition to all of the document layout stuff, and the component library and the brand system, etc., I've got a series of writing guidelines. And Ankit, this comes back to your earlier point on, how opinionated are you with this? Like, we're pretty opinionated right now because we know what a good case study looks like and how it should flow and what the rhythm of that should be. We know what a good one-pager, a good data sheet, etc., should look like. And in my Claude, in my repo here, for each of the different outputs, I've got an example structure of what I want it to look like. So when I use my custom output style in Claude Code with this guideline, I can chuck anything at it, like scraped from the website using Firecrawl, or a transcript from a video call, or anything else, and it can get it into the structure that I want. It might also need some tweaking and some adjustments, but it gets the overall flow right. And then for each of the different asset types that I'm making, we've got an example guideline like this. It's not as detailed as this one because case study requires a bit more, but that's sort of the flow from a writing perspective. We've got a custom output style, which I've just been playing around with like the last week or so. And then I've got detailed writing guidelines for each of the outputs. And then that gives me all of the text that I want to put on the page. Then I take the text with all of the design elements that I was talking through and then put those together. And then that's how we create some of the outputs like this one that we were looking at a moment ago.
Nice. So the output
Yep.
format is looks like a key element to make it didn't feel like AI-ish style.
Yeah, I found that I think the output style helps a lot because you can give some really specific guidance on like avoid these phrases or make sure you don't use delve, like these little things that you give away that it's completely AI written. And then the guidelines are a layer on top of that, because the output style will apply to any of this sort of B2B marketing-y, salesy type of writing that's going to resonate with an enterprise buyer. And then the guidelines let you take any input and adapt it to that specific output.
Very cool.
Yeah. Jeannie.
Yeah. Hi. I have a question. So with the case study prompt you give to AI, it looks like a very long page of content. My question is, do you find it do you find AI can follow through on every details on such a long spectrum document, or how do you address that sometimes AI miss out on some of the details?
Yeah, it's a good point. And it doesn't always hit all of the notes, but one of the ways I try to make sure it does is by using a new session. So like starting fresh again in a new chat window, just turning on my output style, and then having it follow along. Also, I've adapted that guideline based on what I've seen in the past. One tip actually is not to ask Claude to write, or not to ask AI what a writing guideline should be, because I found that when you ask it to write that, it creates things that are way too verbose and repetitive. I found a better approach to use AI in that process is to give it a bunch of good examples and say reverse engineer from these examples what makes a good case study. And then from that, then it will be much more specific than trying to create something from scratch. And that can be a good way of getting something without having to write the entire thing yourself as well. All right, thanks. Yep, Ankit.
Oh, actually, I was going to ask Hano's question, or Jono's question. So she raised her hand, so I'll let her speak. So I was curious about the same question.
Okay, yeah. That was going to be my one of my. I got some like do's and don'ts here. That was going to be one of my don'ts. Like, don't just ask the model to write instructions for the model. Sometimes that meta prompting can be useful, but I found that asking it to reverse engineer a good example instead gets a much higher quality of output than if you're asking it to think of something from scratch. Yeah, Jono.
Hey, man.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, man. For the README, so at the end of like I'm guessing your commands, are you saying like, hey, update the README now, so that when you start your new session, it will have like the latest and greatest that needs to be passed off, or what is, how's that README work?
Yeah, good question. So the README is client agnostic. So I'll only update the README if the process is changing in some meaningful way. And maybe I'll talk a little bit about why I use README instead of Claude.md. But the process for me right now, Jono, is I'll go through the process. I'll keep the same README for a client, and that will be generic. It basically outlines this two-phase process that I've got here. And it just explains to the model, this is what we're working on. This is our process. You're working across different parts of this. I'll give you guidance on what we're working on today. And then only when that process changes somewhat, or I want to improve it, that's when I'll update the README. I've been thinking about adding like a client-specific README as well, which might be useful, but I haven't done that yet.
Got it.
Does that help?
Yeah, so could you scroll down where you had that, where you showed like the READMEs for your like multi-process, the review? Yeah, I think. Okay. So like if I was starting on the left-hand side there, I had the brand system JSON. You had that process where you basically kind of got your template layout that you want for the client, right?
Yeah.
And then you come into this next component library, and maybe you haven't changed the README, but you're saying, hey, review the README of the whole purpose of this project and what we're doing. And then now, like, and then you're saying, like, in that primer or something like that, like, hey, look, I've already created this brand JSON file.
Yes.
We're going to be working on this components part now to bring this brand into components. And then you're reviewing those components from what it generates. This reminds me of one of the questions I had before too. Are you creating each one of those components, like HTML components, like its own separate HTML file, or like just one page of all the components on the HTML file?
Yeah, so two thoughts on that. One is you got the exact process right. I take the output from brand system and pass it on to component library using the same README, and then so on for the asset template. So that, yeah, that's spot on. And for the HTML page, I played around with doing different components and having them standalone, but then I had like so many tool calls and things like that that it just felt easier just to like chuck it all in one. And then when I create the assets, I just say, here's your library of different components. Use whatever you think is best, essentially, for the layout that we're going for.
So that's nice. So like just from one HTML file, it's able to see, oh, I got 100 components to choose from. And
yeah, and there's maybe like 20, 30 components. Like I'll pull up an example here so you can see design system, component library. Yeah, so text might be a little small, so I'll just zoom in a couple bits here. But it's just a standard HTML page. So I've got a bunch of imports for fonts. I use a specific library for icons for Lucid React. I import Tailwind from the CDN. And then I've got custom styles. All these custom styles are created when I create my component library. And they also fill in that asset template that I was talking about earlier. And then the actual components themselves aren't huge. Like this is the title. Like it's not that big. Header component variation 1 is here. Header component variation 2 is here. It's like 10 or 12 lines. It's not crazy. But it uses all of those custom styles. So if I was going to be doing these in different files, then I'd have a lot of duplication unless I'm doing like some weird imports and stuff. And I was like, let me just chuck it all in one. And then the model's smart enough to know when to use what.
I see. Yeah, that markdown, those little markdown notes there probably really help it. That's looking at it.
Yeah. And to give you an idea of like the type of prompts I'm using in the markdown. So as you're explaining that process that I follow here, going between these different steps, it is quite repetitive, right? Like I'm saying, now read the README, and now here's what we've done, and now go to the next thing. And now every time I go through a client, I'm doing these same few steps. So I've got these like chunky prompts that I use, and I version them through Git, and I explain what all of the different outputs are and how I want them to be used. But then I've also been experimenting with custom output styles. So here's an example, custom slash commands that then bring together the different elements. So I've got my prompt, I've got my file references, I've got references to my the images for this specific client. So you can see here, client name, client description. I'd add those as arguments. In this one, I've got paths of locations of where the inspo images are. And this just helps accelerate when I'm doing this stuff ad hoc. So Ankit, to sort of come back to a very early question, like this is the type of stuff, like if I was using the SDK, it'd be much easier to automate this because I could have a folder, here's all the images. I could more programmatically access those images across these different stages of the process. But I'm not there yet because each of these outputs is so varied that I'm having to do a lot more iterative steps in between before I'm ready to pass off onto the next step. So just having that native Claude Code sort of local first chat interface allows me to do that a lot faster than if I was trying to hack around with some more automated ways. But yeah, custom slash commands, massive help. Can't recommend them enough. I use project-specific commands because it lets me save them to my repo, and I can version them through Git and everything. So here's step 1, that's the primer. Here's the create. I've got the arguments to the file paths. I've got links or file references to the templates that I'm using. Here's 3. Here's how I want you to review things, etc. So huge accelerator, because before this I was like copy and pasting stuff over and it was working, but it just took so long. This still takes long, but it's a bit faster.
Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like they finally fix. Initially, as the argument part is a bit buggy from Claude Code, but the recent new one looks better.
Yeah, and this isn't documented anywhere, but you can use multiple arguments and place them sequentially in places by having spaces between your arguments, and then using double quotes for your variable. So for here, if I was doing everything, if I was doing things properly, it would just be, it'd be AI Builder Club, and then I'd have AI Community, and that would kind of work, and it would place AI Builder Club in the first variable, and it would place the description in the second variable. But what they've added now is, and I've done a bunch of testing on this, so I know that it works, is that if you use double quotes, you can have spaces.
That's really good.
And have things that are verbose, than like trying to hack together something with a bunch of hyphens and things like that.
Yeah, very cool.
Vikrant?
Yeah, 2 questions for you. So you've been walking through Claude Code. Have you seen any regression in the quality of the work with Claude Code? And 2, how many of these custom commands are you using, and is that overcoming any of the challenges that you might be facing with Claude Code if you are?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like Claude wakes up on a different side of the bed every day. Like sometimes it's like, oh my God, how did you do that? That's amazing. And then sometimes it's like, I'm going to throw my laptop out the window.
All right, so you're experiencing what I'm experiencing.
Yeah, there's still those like where you're just like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's so good. One thing I've noticed is that getting more specific with the feedback seems to be helping a bit more. Like before, it was just one-shot things, and it was amazing.
Yep.
And now it's like, okay, it follows things. It's a bit less creative in some ways, but then if you get specific, it seems to still have that good design chops. And I'm talking mainly on the design side. But yeah, the custom slash command.
Oh, go ahead. I'll let you say.
I was just going to say, the custom slash command, I don't think they're helping with the performance, but because I iterate on those slash commands and the prompts that I'm referencing in those slash commands, when I see something go wrong, it's like a living system. Like I do something and I'm like, oh, it keeps making this error. Let me change my prompt, which is referenced in the slash command, to then account for that error, and sort of trying to tweak it and keep that there's a set of instructions live and living.
Yeah, good. I'll let some other folks.
Yeah, Mahir.
Yeah, I've got a question. So, do you ever find that the business itself gives you assets, like PDFs and stuff, and do you ever find that you have to extract information, like look or information from that? And if so, how would you do that?
Yeah, good question. So I had 2 examples of that here. So I'll jump back into Cursor and just show you a real example. So here's one where they had, and this was the one that we were just looking at, that like dark mode example. So they had this already, and they were like, okay, I was like, this doesn't look good, guys. You can't charge like $100,000 for something like this. You need to look more credible. You need to look more professional. But the copy on here is good. Like the words and everything, they spent a lot of time thinking about it. It's just the design that we need to focus on. In this case, what we did was just use Claude.ai or Claude Desktop to extract all of the text from this, put it into a markdown file, and then just use that as the input. So I didn't actually have to go through like the whole writing guideline process for this one. It was just take the text they've already got and make it look pretty. I'll show you another example where, and I think I've got one here. Yeah, so these guys had a design. They went through a bit of a rebrand. So their website wasn't updated, but they had some of these assets that they said, hey, we want the new brand to look like this. Can you go and update it? And I don't know if I've got the case study here. I think I got it somewhere else. Oh, maybe I got it here. So we took that new brand. No, this is an old version. And we created a component library, and then the final outputs that match that a little bit more. So it's more based on the updated reference images that they had sent. So to answer your question, it kind of depends on what they want to do with those existing assets. Like, A, do they just want to have the copy and the text and just redesign them? Or is it B, they've got these well-designed things and they want to use that design in future assets? And we'd probably approach those in two different ways depending on the situation.
But in either case, you use Claude Code to extract?
When I did this one, I don't think Claude Code would accept PDFs. So I just did it with Claude.ai, like the browser.
I would suggest you can take a look. There are a few PDF extractor. Mistral OCR was the one, works pretty well.
Yeah,
from my
you know, I've
experience.
found Claude Code to really struggle with PDF, even if you like really try to work it. But I did find that if I use Windsurf, and within Windsurf, if I use Claude, even Claude 3.7 thinking, Claude 4 thinking, what it will end up doing is it will actually end up creating a script. You have to be a little bit specific in kind of what you want, and then it can work through it and extract the text pretty well, or build something. But yeah, Claude Code really struggles with PDF.
Yeah, I think Claude Code is pretty bad, but Claude.ai, or here's like the desktop version. This was another one that I was working on where they had some existing docs, and I said extract all of this into a neat markdown file, no fancy prompts or anything, and it did a pretty good job of like pulling that out and formatting it, etc. So I think you play around with a couple of these things and see what makes sense. If I'm paying $200 a month for Claude, I'm going to try and use that as my default. So I try to use that more than messing around with other tools.
Yeah, and generally the
Thanks for sharing the Mistral one, Jason.
Yeah, right. And also generally multimodal model are pretty good, and especially those complex PDF that has charts, flows. They will be pretty good at that. But I feel like when do you let us know once you productionize this? I think that would be, me personally would be interested in using that, and I'm sure other people would be interested in. And I feel like there are a lot of interesting you can do to integrate with like Nano Banana model with those more complex image assets as well. But really cool product, man. I really enjoy it. I feel like there's a lot of potential. I was sold.
Yeah, there was a whole other thing that I spoke with Jay about presenting. I was going to talk about how you can use wireframes in design to improve the quality of your outputs, but I know we're coming up on time. I'll just pull up a quick example here.
You do all that in TL Draw?
TL Draw, and then copy paste screenshots from this. So like, here's my website here, and here's my wireframe, and I sort of went back and forth to like build out the different parts. It's changed a little bit, but you can see like this is
interesting
where it was. This is how I want it.
Did you build this one yourself, Akhil, or did you? Okay.
Well, Claude built it. I was just along for the ride.
No, I mean, it was just you. Like, you solo built it with Claude. You didn't,
It took longer to like get the design that I wanted. Like, I spent a lot of time thinking like, how do I want this to look and feel? And then it ended up here. If I had something to work with already, it'd be easier.
For the wireframe, did you draw yourself and then export them as a big image file to the cloud?
So I did it in chunks. Actually, that's a good point. So I built out the wireframe because that helped me just get my thoughts down, and then I would just like take a screenshot of this, like this.
Yeah.
Copy that into Claude. I'd also have another in that example. I don't have that repo open right now, but in that example, I had a README with a description of the style that I wanted. Like, here's the style, here's the vibe. I want these gradients. I want this sort of glassy mirror, glassy sort of glassmorphic look here. I want these things to like move in this way. I want this accent font, this primary font, this text font. Like I had all of that defined in a README. And then when I gave it a screenshot and said, hey, I want to work on this part now, it was much more, it was much more consistent. That's the word. Like I know that if you're using different sessions and you're jumping in and out of stuff, like you can end up with stuff that starts to diverge. But by having that sort of README approach, I found that it worked a bit better. And maybe for this one, I could have used Claude.md instead of a README, but it was fine for what I was trying to do.
Yeah, nice. And it's pretty smart how you communicate the carousel at top by in the wireframe as well. Very cool.
Yeah.
Nice, awesome. Thanks a lot for sharing, Akhil. I personally really enjoy it. And again, let us know if anything we can help with. Once you have a product, please share with us. We'd love to try things out. Thanks so much for sharing.
I was going to say, this is an offer for anybody in the community who is doing B2B sales. If you want some assets, or I'm doing like one free asset for anybody who wants it in the community. So if you're interested, let me know. I can hook you up with something.
Sounds good. Definitely. Yeah, so reach out to Akhil on the community. Thanks again for sharing. Really enjoy it.
Cheers, everybody. Have a good day.
Cheers.
See you later. Bye.
Thank you.